Hi, this is Craig Ancel, and you're listening to Career Growth Made Easy podcast. It's time to celebrate because we have hit our 1 year anniversary. I can't believe it. Just one short year ago, I was learning how to hook up my podcast equipment and started to get some podcast episodes in the pipe for upload. I want to thank each and every one of you so much for being a valuable, consistent subscriber and providing some great feedback through email and social media. We've put together a best of episode based on the most downloaded podcasts for 2020. It's no surprise, a majority of the requests for information have come in about resumes. We're going to start out going back to episode 2, and I've put together a few key snippets. This is where I shared on my job loss, the importance of working with others so that you don't go through your situation alone. And then I wrap it up after job recovery with a pay it forward moment. And that's part of what this podcast is about. The intent is to provide hope, vision, and information to help you succeed in life. And to do that, for this particular snippet, I'm going to share 2 key important functions that you need to apply to your resume to make it stronger. Let's listen in. Previously, I had shared my unexpected job loss after nearly 12 years of dedicated service. You know, my stomach still twists and turns even though those days are long gone. I just keep visualizing the day that it happened. I overcame and succeeded. However, it wasn't an easy journey. I've been there and done that, as they say. But please know, if you're there now, I fully recognize and I support you. It doesn't matter if you're hearing this in the U.S. or abroad. I know what it feels like. And even if you're new to the job force, I can understand the potential fear, anxiety, or questioning attitude and thoughts popping in your head, such as, am I good enough? Who will hire me? From my point of view, I would say this is normal. At least it was for me. And if you disagree with me, that's okay. I'm just sharing from my personal experience. You know, thinking back, while desperately looking for a job, I really looked forward to the next paycheck, whatever that might be and wherever that might come from. Just a chance to feel like I contributed back to the family again. My loving wife, Erin, was doing more than just her share of the household chores, holding the fort down, shuttling the kids back and forth, homemaking. That part cannot be overstated. While there were some pauses in our household income stream, we couldn't have gotten through it alone. We had to swallow our pride, and we learned over time to depend on others' love, prayers, and generosity to get through that unemployment. To this day, we still ask for and exchange loving thoughts, wishes, and most importantly, prayers for one another, especially those that are going through hard times. We appreciated any and all financial support friends and family were able to give. We do our best every day to pay that forward through what we call in our church the 3 T's. They stand for time, talent, and treasure. Switching back to that fateful day and my resume. It was outdated for sure. It took a lot of time and a lot of effort. And when I was done, it was a compilation of stuff. No matter how hard I tried, I just didn't have a message. After that job loss, it was so difficult to pull accurate details and dates together. It felt good, sure, to get the info out of my head and onto paper, but it wasn't well organized and it didn't tell a story. The trick was that I should make sure all the info just didn't end up on the resume. Let me explain. A resume introduces you to a specific job opening or job availability. If you're showcasing your working level skills, you can highlight the tasks or the actions that you've performed at various jobs, maybe even choose a core skills or key competencies section and place it at the top. However, if you've built up some experience and now are looking to promote into or apply to a management or leadership position, then describing the task-based accomplishments just won't do because they won't highlight you properly. When coaching, I frequently suggest using the with him approach. That's spelled WITHM. IIFM, and it stands for What's in It for Me. So, from a potential future employer's viewpoint, they want to envision you as a good fit for their opening. If you list task-based activities, it portrays you as a working-level team member instead of describing management or leadership characteristics such as having and seeing bigger visions. Those aspiring to promote many times seek growth opportunities both personally and professionally outside their existing roles. In my case, I started as an engineer at the working level and earned several promotions into leadership, of course over time, and my resume needed to highlight that very clearly and very cleanly. Talking about clean and clear language, another tool that is frequently used for actions and goal setting also is great for resumes, and the acronym is SMART. You may have heard of it. We use the SMART approach to define details by describing accomplishments that are specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-based. This technique helps you provide the details and specifics when listing key accomplishments. Here's a couple of examples in case you're not familiar with it. When brainstorming resume content from your work history and experiences, you might have written, "I saved our company money by reducing customer refunds," or "helped encourage sales of our products and services." These are very simple examples to illustrate a point. They are vague. They don't convey a strong, clear message of your accomplishments, which is the goal here. I would suggest to use SMART messaging. So how do you do that? I'm glad you asked. "I saved our company money by reducing customer refunds" could turn into, "saved $12,000 last year by converting 24 customer refund requests," and "helped encourage sales of our product or service" could turn into, "sold 17 units of product service, resulting in $34,000 of revenue." You probably want to add the date and time in there. On our first example, you may be able to punch this up a little bit more, but only if the facts support it. If there was a specific time period last year that most of the refund conversions happened, then you could say something like, "saved $9,000 in fiscal year 18 quarter 3. Or saved $9,000 in the fall of 2018 with 18 refund conversions. The data collection part is typically a lot easier if you're still employed and have access to your records. Speaking of records, going forward, if you don't do this already, I recommend some type of documentation system, whether it's computer file folders, email archives, notepads, whatever you trust for storage and are familiar with, because you'll want to use this technique frequently. Anytime you receive a note of appreciation for a unique task, or if you are recognized for some type of accomplishment, regardless of how it was communicated, verbally in person, by phone, email, old-fashioned letter, whatever the matter, this should be documented accurately. Why, do you ask? Having this info at hand is extremely valuable for updating your resume and also comes in very handy at review time. Wow, I hope you enjoyed that. I want you to know that I sat back and smiled as I listened to the playback and selected the snippets so that I could give you the best of from that episode. If you're out there and saying, "Gosh, Craig, I don't have a resume yet," or "mine's outdated," or "I don't even know where I could find it," then that episode might help you out. However, if you need a greater helping hand than just a few minutes of a podcast, we also have something new for 2021. It's my Resume Masterclass. It has 6 powerful modules, each being 15 minutes or less, and they walk you through how to build your resume from scratch, how to update it, or even redesign it. The process is proven, and it works whether you're in high school or all the way up to the corporate world, including Fortune 500 companies. There's no need to hire expensive resume services and spend hundreds or even thousands of dollars of your hard-earned money. By going through the Resume Masterclass, not only will you come out with a polished, up-to-date resume, but you'll also be better prepared for an upcoming job interview. Take advantage of it today. That's rmcenroll.com. Another very popular podcast was Overloaded by Text and Email. For this particular Best of series for 2020, I'm going to go ahead and pull out the content for email only. If you're interested in improving your texting, you can go back and listen to that episode separately. So, for this, we're going to talk about work email and volleying, the back and forth that sometimes happens when you don't seem to get clear responses. I also talk about a painful redline editing experience that happened to me and what I learned from it so that I could develop a clean, clear, concise email writing process. I hope you benefit from this. Let's listen in. Let's go ahead and jump right in and talk about work emails. If you've ever needed some info or maybe just wanted to get a few questions answered and thought an email's the way to go, I'll fire something off quick and get a quick response. But then you find their first reply just wasn't cutting it. Then what followed was a series of email volleys back and forth, kind of like a pro tennis match, all in an effort to get the original information you needed or get your original questions answered. I'll bet some of you out there can relate. Worse yet, has anybody out there ever had an email volley campaign go beyond one day? Email volleying takes a lot of time and energy, and it takes it away from our everyday productivity. It stops us, and we have to read and or reply to another email. We become totally distracted from whatever it is we're working on. And if you think about the bigger picture, that means we're at least 2 times less efficient because not only are we robbing our time and productivity, but the other person on the end of the email that's responding and reading our emails too. With their first reply, maybe it only answered part of your question. It gave some info on the topic you needed, or maybe like my text example, you didn't receive any valuable information at all. Your second and additional follow-up volley emails slowly narrowed down the focus and pinpointed what the info was that you needed. You were clarifying your request. Eventually, your questions got answered. You gave up as the number of replies seemed to approach infinity. You did the unthinkable and called the person directly. Or, like me, you went elsewhere for your info. Hopefully, I got you thinking a little bit out there. I have a final example today that frankly was very painful for me to go through, but it also provided an incredible learning experience, and I'm willing to relive it with you in hopes that there'll be some benefit. Years ago, I asked a coworker to peer check one of my emails for grammar and clarity before I sent it out to a group of more than 24, and it included some in mid and upper management. I think it was about 1.5 pages and 3 large paragraphs. You should know I spent a lot of time double and I think even triple checking the work to make sure it was clear, well organized, and well written. I was pretty sure it was going to pass the test with flying colors. My coworker, with printed hard copy in hand and red pen, went to work. I had to hold my emotions back because the slaughter was on. From my very first paragraph, sentence by sentence, they got redlined. What came out of the ashes was a single sentence, only one sentence from my entire first paragraph that had survived. Well, I twisted angrily in my chair as he went on to paragraphs 2 and 3. When the bloodshed was over, yep, you guessed it, only one sentence from each paragraph survived. 3 paragraphs, 1.5 pages, now 3 sentences. With a few deep breaths, I calmly tried to ask that we walk through this example so he could explain what just happened. Even if my 3 paragraphs were written clearly and with proper grammar, I found out they were unnecessary. Sure, I had the info well structured and organized. However, there was only 1 point per paragraph, and ultimately this could be conveyed in 1 sentence each. You see, this particular coworker happened to be ex-military, and in one position that he served, he was administrative assistant to a general, I believe. The messages to the general had to be conveyed in the shortest form possible, and this is where his messaging capabilities came in handy. I combined what he taught me, along with my personal, passionate study for self-improvement and high-performance growth, along with hanging that redlined email in my computer monitor for the next year plus, to help me focus on the concept of less is more. Regarding my earlier email example, where it was slaughtered with the red pen, 3 paragraphs at 1.5 pages total, turning into 3 lonely sentences, we're going to explore that a little bit more in detail, and hopefully this will provide some value to you out there that maybe you can look at your current emails and find a way to clean them up and make them more efficient. I know this will help, especially if you're suffering from the email volleying that I talked about earlier, where you can't seem to get a clear response to a question or clear information on your first request, and it takes several iterations. What I realized I had done in my first paragraph, for example, was I was introducing my email, which is not always a bad thing, but I went into too much explanation. I explained I was going to be doing something in the future and to be on the lookout for that, say, calendar invite for a meeting. That wasn't necessary because I should have just gone ahead and filed the calendar invite instead of talked about it. So I could introduce the email with 1 sentence. In the second paragraph, I talk about the content of the email, maybe 1 or 2 sentences. I didn't have to go into explanations or expand on anything, just hit the cold, hard facts. In the third paragraph, which was my closing paragraph, I said things like, and if anybody else needs this email, I didn't mean to leave them off, so please go ahead and forward it to others. And if anybody needs any information or additional information, please send a reply back. Those things simply aren't necessary. Even though we want to be nice about it and cordial, people are going to go ahead and forward the email to others out there, regardless if you give them quote, quote, permission or not, or remind them to do so. And if somebody else really, truly needs information from you, assuming they even got to your third paragraph, in my case, on the second page, they're going to reply to you, call you, hunt you down to get that information. So you don't always have to say that. Now, maybe if you're communicating to a customer, it's polite to do something like that. But at least for internal emails between colleagues or between management staff, get to the point quickly. Write your email number 1. Don't send it number 2. Take a few pauses, reread the email, and ask yourself, what does this email truly say? What is the point I'm trying to get across? If you were intending it to be a question and answer email, make sure your questions are clear. Some of the tricks that you can do are to number your questions or to bullet them. That way, if you introduce the email with, "Hi there, I have a few questions on Project X. Please see below," now you've explained it. If not, and you put them into a paragraph, they get buried sometimes. Just like in my text example, only the top part of it was read. I think in today's world, we simply don't have enough time to read all the information provided to us because we're getting bombarded, and it's just best to be short and simple and to the point. So, talking about simple, there's actually an acronym out there that might help you. It's called KISS, K-I-S-S, and it stands for Keep It Simple Stupid. No, I'm not calling you, the listener, or your intended recipient of your text or email stupid. It's just an old phrase, an old adage out there, and the point is, just remember to keep things simple. Regarding emails, what I would suggest you do is just type out what's on your mind. Get it out on paper. Get it out onto the computer screen first. It's a lot harder to create content than it is to edit it, that's for sure. So if you've ever helped somebody, whether it's a family member, a friend, or a work colleague, you notice it's a lot easier to give feedback and edit than it is to sit there and brainstorm together. After you've done that, go back and reread what you've written. Ask yourself a couple questions, perhaps these or similar ones. Does it make any sense? Does it convey my point? If I'm asking something of someone, is my message clean and clear, and am I doing it up front so as not to lose their attention? If you pass on all these above parts, great. Now, go back and run your less is more filter. If the text you put down isn't necessary, delete it. If you feel funny or uncomfortable when you're deleting it, What you could do instead, and I used to do this so it might help you, is copy it, or rather cut it and paste it at the bottom of your email. That way you still have it and you can see what you removed later. Once the email is KISS and less is more compliant, go ahead and reread it. If it flows, you might be done. And then for fun, if you cut out that text and you placed it at the bottom of your email, go read that. It's probably just a bunch of jumbled phrases or sentences, but you'll see all those types of words and statements you made weren't necessary to get the point across. They were simply waste. You just created a good filter to get rid of the extra junk that people don't need to know and might even ignore in some cases. One other thing we need to talk about regarding emails is something critical, the subject line. You need to make the subject line short and sweet. If it's not clear, your email could be ignored. Your subject line entices the reader to open the email. Without a good subject line, you could be sunk, regardless of what type of practices you follow to improve the body, the content of your email. Wow, that episode number 3, Overloaded by Email and Text, was pretty powerful. I remember there were also some really great tips on email forwarding, how to cut down on the length of the forward and make it more focused so you get more responses and more attention, and also how to handle attachments better with email. You might want to go back to episode 3 and check that out. Here's another very popular episode titled No Job, No Resume, No Problem. It's a different take when I was unemployed and what I did to recover, including the absolute need to repurpose and reinvent myself and my resume. Check it out. I didn't know what to do next. I felt paralyzed. I was literally lost. You see, I've been very fortunate and blessed that I had found regular work since I was 15. Being unemployed, I felt like I had nowhere to turn. There didn't seem to be any online guidance that would fit my needs. Simply searching the word resume on the internet yielded pages of results. Pages of online resume services, most of which made many promises. Their cost ranged from hundreds of dollars to well over $1,000. I remember the message that kept popping into my head. It was the thought that the more I pay, the better my resume would be. Maybe this was subliminal marketing, I don't know, but I kept thinking about using an expensive resume service. The funny thing, even though we were struggling financially, somehow I was considering purchasing one of those expensive resume services. It was all about the feeling of getting out of that state of unemployment. I wanted it so bad, I just didn't know how to get there. Sitting back in the silence with what felt like numbness, I quickly came to a difficult realization. Working for the same company for nearly a dozen years, I became comfortable. Somewhere along the line, I stopped updating my resume. In fact, I wasn't exactly sure where to find it when I looked for it, and I wasn't sure what version or what time in my life it would represent. I dreaded thinking about that. When and if I locate it, would it be the resume I originally used when I got hired nearly 12 years ago? I slowly realized I didn't have an updated resume. As I looked for a full-time job, there didn't seem to be many roles out there that matched my background and work history. My primary target was an engineering manager. This was something I had done well and had strong experience with. Days turned to weeks, and weeks turned to months. I realized while continuing to look for full-time work, I needed to reinvent myself. I needed to look at what companies were hiring for and see if I could transform into that candidate. Now, let me explain. Just because I was an accomplished engineer doesn't mean that that was the only role that I would be good at or willing to pursue. Prior to being an engineering manager, I was an engineer. So what positions could be applicable for an engineer with strong leadership skills? My search for a project engineer was born out of that idea. Slowly, I became more comfortable as my confidence grew. Knowing that I met the job requirements, I applied for a handful of positions. Sometimes the roles were called PE for short. But looking at some of the requirements, it confused me. Eventually, I learned that PE also stood for Professional Engineer, which had a completely different set of requirements, including a state certification, which I did not have. Mental note to self. If I ever use an acronym, even if it's industry specific, make sure I define it first. Note to hiring companies. That would have saved a lot of my time and mental energy. If you remember all this, it was happening during an economic downturn. My very low to non-existent callback rate for full-time project engineer roles signaled to me it was time to transform again. With further research, I learned my engineering background and strong leadership align nicely with project manager roles. This time, the acronym PM didn't cause as much pain, but there was something lurking out there. It was a program manager, also called PM for short. So there I was between project and program manager. I researched the difference. It seems my background was more aligned to the role of project manager, but I could envision supporting a program manager too. Though not my preference, of course, you can't be picky when you're financially strapped and riding a downward spiral. From my view, I'd explain the difference between a project and program as follows. Projects are unique, differing with specific tasks, goals, and milestones. Programs align with managing a group of related projects. It's a little more high level. My prior engineering roles required heavy focus on the details, though as I moved up the engineering supervision level and into management, I had to learn to leave the extreme details to the team. Since I had worked on so many unique, different projects over the years, I felt more strongly aligned to the project management roles. So I started to apply for project management positions, and that's when a Fortune 500 company responded back favorably. There were close to a half dozen interviews, including phone, one-on-one, and group settings. As I rounded my 7th month of unemployment, the chain was broken. I was hired as a project manager. During this humbling process, I learned to ask for and receive constructive criticism on my resume, interviewing style, and discussion content. I vowed never to be caught like I was before with an outdated resume, lack of knowledge on cover letters, or interviewing. That is where my passionate study began, and since that day, I have stayed current with winning resume trends, proven interviewing techniques, studied and applied high-performance growth. For several years, I have coached high-performance growth benefiting people in their personal and professional lives. Before we move on to our next and final section for 2020 Best of series, I want to take a moment and share that I recently was able to speak to a North American IT support group. One of the members, Shelly, which was a user engagement IT professional, shared she had been with her job nearly 21 years and didn't have a current resume. She went on to say, "Every time I start to update it, it frustrates me and I don't know where to begin." If that's you, regardless of how long you've been in the job force or how many jobs you've had, take this moment right here and now and stop. Make a firm and solid commitment to yourself that you're either going to dig up your resume or start from scratch. Whether you can use a couple of these podcast episodes to help you get a boost and get started, great. If you need that extra helping hand, we are here for you. We have a lot of experience, and that is channeled and focused into the Resume Masterclass. You can grab it at rmcenroll.com today. For our final Best of podcast for 2020, we're going to shift gears and go to worrying about what if. All the great tips, information, and education that we've provided for the full year won't be of any use if you're stuck in a state of what if. Listen to this podcast where I pull out the key points and give you some cool tips and techniques how to get out of worrying what if. When Ryan Dice from Digital Marketer was interviewed, he talked about how businesses attempt to transform their customers' lives, how they try to move them from before state to an after state. These states relate to before the purchase and after. For the purpose of this podcast, let's change it up a bit. Rather than talk about customers, we're going to talk about you, the Career Growth Made Easy listener. Also, we're going to call these states the present state or the now and the future state. Imagine 3 columns titled Status, Before, and After. Each column has 3 entries underneath their title. The status column, first item, is have. The before column, not have, wandering. The after column, direction or plan. The second item under status is feel. The before column, fear, nervous, or stress. The after column, confident or calm. And the final status, your day, the before is worry and upset, and the after is peace. Let me repeat those in case you're taking notes. The status, have. Before, not have, and wandering. After, direction and plan. Status, feel. Before, fear, nervous, stress. After, confident and calm. Your day, worry or upset, and after, peace. It's a story about transformation, and in this case, it's moving you from a present state to a new future state. All that sounds great, going from one state, one set of conditions or feelings to a completely new set. Our future state having a plan, feeling confident, and our days being more peaceful. So, how do we do that, you might ask? How do we move from what if to this new state? It's a short process, but it does take some effort. In the book titled The One Thing, Gary W. Keller and Jay Papasan talk about what we suffer from most. It's prioritization. By the way, you might have recognized one of the author's names, Keller, Gary W. Keller. Yes, it's the same Gary Keller who is the co-founder and chairman of Keller Williams Realty, one of the world's largest real estate companies. So let's pause and take that in for a moment. Maybe there is something to this prioritization, this one thing, after all. Back to the word prioritization. What comes to your mind when I say that? Okay, wow. If your heart just skipped a beat or you feel a headache coming on from the sudden overwhelm, you're not alone. Maybe you thought or said, what if? Maybe, how am I going to do that? Or, I can't, there's just so much. Take a deep breath. I'm here with you. I'm reaching through this podcast mic to give you a virtual pat on the back. Of course, I do have my face mask on. It's a lot more simplified than you think. We can turn this around and pose ourselves one key question. What is the one thing that you can do today that will make everything else tomorrow easier? I'd suggest starting out small, making one change, and see how it goes. From there, look at bigger changes. You might be wondering how to do that. Maybe you're asking if there's a better time in the day to do that. So prioritization can and should be about your time, of course, but also about your energy and effort. That's right. You could spend a short amount of time on something, but use an extreme amount of effort and thereby sabotage the rest of your day. Back in episode 23, I referenced something called decision fatigue. Did you know there are better parts of the day than others to make important decisions? Research has shown you should hold off from making certain decisions until you're in the best state. If you regularly operate in or recognize yourself going into a state of what if, your decision-making process could be stalled. That means your decisions get stacked up, and in order to offload them by the end of the day or the week, you might make rapid-fire decisions, potentially poor choices, to get them off your plate. By the way, that episode 23 was appropriately titled Building Success Through Failure. If any of our great inventors had been fixated or focused on worrying about what if, I doubt we'd have electricity, the light bulb, or the fast networks and communication that we do today. Speaking about electricity, that made me think of inventor Nikola Tesla and today's modern world car company, Tesla, the electric car manufacturer. What if the modern car company, Tesla, stopped early in their tracks and said, what if? What if it's too difficult? What if people won't buy an electric car? This episode is more about our emotional state than anything else. If we spend a majority of our time in worry mode or wrapped up in our emotions, we can become trapped. The great news? There are ways to get out of our emotional state and connect back to the logical side of our brains. I'll share on that in just a moment. And in episode 25, Give Yourself Permission, I shared this golden nugget. The ability to take action is based on the ability to make decisions. The ability to take action is based on the ability to make decisions. Action is what many businesses hire us for. Action is what gets things done. It rolls the ball forward. Earlier, I mentioned I would share some ways to get out of our emotional state and back into our logical mind. Now, don't misunderstand. All human beings have an emotional side and logical side in our brains. It's really a matter of how much time we spend in each. If you ever found yourself nervously tapping your fingers, hand, or foot, maybe tapping a pen or pencil, or perhaps chewing on a pen or pencil, those can be signs that you're in your emotional side. These actions could represent fear, worry, or anxiety, which could result in delays or our inability to act, to make a decision. Coaches, counselors, doctors, and even those on TV, in the movies, and on radio have used at least one of the following tips to help them move from emotional state to logical. Yes, I'm going to tell you what a couple of them are, but first I'm going to see if you already know what one of them is without even realizing it. Have you ever seen a TV news show right before it goes live, or a behind-the-scenes shot of a radio broadcast prior to starting? Do you remember what they typically do? They count down from 5 to 1, then the show starts on 0. 0 is typically silent as they motion to the host to start the show. That's where the action part comes in from lights, camera, action. So why do they count down? Why not ready, set, go? I mean, you're going on live TV or on the news. That's really important and exciting. Thousands, perhaps millions could tune in or watch you. It's more to do with science than cueing the actors or news anchors to begin on time. Our brains can't function in both our emotional side and logical side at the same time. So, by counting backwards, and that is key, counting backwards, we must use our logical side. As a result, we force our brains to shift into logic mode and thus away from emotional. This countdown helps prevent emotional hijackings and keeps us in our logical mind. If you noticed earlier, I said counting backwards is key. So why not just count from 1 to 5 or 1 to 10? Because from early on in our childhood, we learn numbers, how to count. First 1 to 5 or 1 to 10, then 1 to 20, 50, or 100. All the time we're reinforcing we know 1, 2, 3, etc. Eventually, our brains are so overprogrammed with counting that we can do it on autopilot. I think I owe you a few more tips on shifting from an emotional state back to a logical one. By the way, they're not mine, just some techniques and information I picked up along the way. I'm not a doctor, so if you need medical assistance or counseling, rather than following these steps, please seek it appropriately. We've already covered counting backwards. The next one is the deep breath approach. When you recognize or feel an overwhelming emotional state coming on, you can try this. Pause what you're doing and slowly inhale as deeply as you can through your nose. Then slowly blow out through your slightly open mouth. It's a trigger mechanism to get your body to get out of sync with the current state and do a reboot, if you will. I'm a computer guy, so I like to use that term. The final one also uses breathing, but it's slightly different. Inhale slowly, but as deeply as you can, then hold. Then release out of your mouth, similar to the first. These two breathing exercises are meant to break the body's natural rhythm or state. It signals an interruption to the current state and can help you get back to a logical frame of mind. Okay, so we've covered a lot there. I hope you've enjoyed the 2020 Career Growth Made Easy podcast Best of series. We look forward to serving you in 2021, and we'll always be willing to listen to your requests, your specific struggles or challenges in the workforce or in your personal life with regards to growth, and help you find ways to overcome those hurdles and barriers and find a path towards success. For the specific information on all the shows that we covered, check the show notes. We'll put links in there, as well as a link to our brand new Resume Masterclass. We made it extremely affordable and have broken it down to be clean, clear, and crisp. There's no fluff. You get directly into the 6-module process using a step-by-step approach, and the longest module is about 15 minutes, so we promise not to waste your time and get you focused on building or updating what's most important regarding career growth, your resume. Don't forget, with a strong resume and following the Resume Masterclass process, you'll also be strongly prepared for your interview. You can find us at Craig Ancel with Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. And for 2021, we're also adding Twitter. God bless. Wishing you peace, health, and happiness for the new year. This has been Craig Ancel. Thanks for watching. If you've enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to our channel. New episodes every Monday. In the meantime, why don't you follow us on social media? At Craig Ancel on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. To book a coaching appointment, download our free guides, or join our email list, check out the links in the description below.